We're doing meatballs in this episode of the meal prep series. These aren't traditional meatballs. They're going to be done a little bit differently with a different type of sauce. It's super easy to make, tastes absolutely incredible, and it's relatively cheap too. I'll also leave all of the nutritional values in the video as well as in a description. And just before we get into the video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. Let's get into it.
Alright, starting out with a fan favourite, which is rice. We're going to be doing it a little bit differently this time. We're going to add 300 grams of washed basmati rice to a baking dish, and we're going to cover that with 600 milliliters of boiling hot water. Do make sure it's boiling, otherwise this will take ages to cook. Season to taste with salt, and then just give it a quick mix around to break up any potential clumps. This can then be covered with some foil, make sure it's nice and tight so no steam can escape, then take it over to an oven that is at 190 degrees Celsius or 375 degrees Fahrenheit and cook for 25 minutes undisturbed. For the other elements of this dish, we're going to be using broccolini. You can use regular broccoli if you wanted to, and this is 300 grams worth. I'm just going to take off the woody stems and just discard or place into compost, and then just slice these into even sized pieces, making sure that they are the same size so that they cook at the same time. Next is 4 cloves of fresh garlic and 15 grams of fresh ginger. Both of these can be ran along a fine microplane to create pastes, and you can mix these together because they're going into the sauce at the same time as well, and we get that nice beautiful blend of flavours. As for the meatballs, we're going to add in 1 kilo of lean beef mince to a mixing bowl, following that up with 2 whole eggs for extra protein, along with 50 grams of panko breadcrumbs. Both of these are going to bind it together. 4 grams of both garlic and onion powder for concentrated flavours. 1 gram of both dried thyme and oregano for a nice little herbaceousness. 60 grams of tomato ketchup to add sweetness and a little bit of moisture. Then season to taste with sea salt flakes, and of course cracked black pepper, about 30 cracks worth. Let's then get in there with clean hands and give this a really good mix around till everything's nice and smooth and mixed well. If you don't like touching your meat, you can use gloves or you can use a spoon, it's completely up to you. But once that's all done, this can then be weighed out, and I recommend just weighing the whole mass amount, and then we want 15 individual balls, and it works out to be about 80 grams or so per ball. With that done, we're then going to roll these up nice and tight. Do little spirals on your hand, squeeze them together, just make sure they don't fall apart, just until you have something that looks like this. And with that all done, just make sure all of them are the same size, that way they'll cook at the same time. Last but not least is the sauce. We're going to add 120 grams of sriracha sauce to a mixing bowl. If you don't like spice, I'll leave alternatives in the description, but we are going to mellow it out with 30 milliliters of apple cider vinegar, 60 milliliters of reduced sodium soy sauce, 50 grams of honey, and then add in those garlic and ginger paste that we made before. All we need to do with this is give it a quick mix around with a fork or a whisk, just until you have a nice smooth consistency, and then just pop it aside for the time being. Going back to the rice, it's been doing its thing for 25 minutes. We can then carefully remove it from the oven and turn the oven off as it's no longer needed. Then we're going to allow it to rest with the foil on for 5 minutes before removing and then fluffing up with a spatula or a fork. This whey comes out incredibly well. It's super soft and fluffy, still has a little bit of moisture in it without being too dry. And if you like a rice cooker, use that. I'll just do it this way from now on because I actually really enjoy this a lot more than the other methods that we've been doing. As for the rice, these are all of the macros, and it is calculated per portion, and there's 5 portions in this recipe. The next thing to do is the broccolini. I'm going to place a large wok over a high heat. I'm going to add in 1.5 tablespoons of peanut oil. You can use vegetable oil if need be. And then we're going to add in that broccolini that we prepared earlier, along with sea salt flakes to taste. And I'm going to use ground white pepper. Don't use cracked black pepper because the whole peppercorns will burn a lot easier. This can then be stir fried for about 4 to 5 minutes, just until it's al dente, which means it's still got a little bit of a bite on it. And we do want it to be a little bit firmer because if we're going to be reheating this, we don't want to overcook it obviously, and it just turns into mush. You can also practice the little flick of the wrist as well, just try not to spill it everywhere. But once you're satisfied with how firm it is or how soft it is, this can then immediately be turned off the heat and add in 2 teaspoons of sesame oil to add a really nice subtle nutty flavour. Mix that round well, and then we can remove this from the stovetop. And this is the macros for each portion of the broccolini. Last but not least is the meatballs. We're going to place a large flat bottomed pan over a medium high heat, add in 1.5 tablespoons of peanut oil or vegetable oil, and then we're going to use 1 meatball and just spread that oil around the pan, obviously once it's nice and hot. Then we're going to spread these out evenly so they're not sitting on top of one another, and do this in batches. Then fry these off for 1 minute on each side. We're going to flip these over probably about 4 or 5 times in the process, and we want to make sure every single side, I know they're obviously round, but every single side needs to be browned off with that nice golden crust. Overall, we want to cook these for about 6 to 7 minutes, ensuring that they're obviously cooked in the center, but we don't want them to overcook because we will be reheating after if you're obviously using this for meal prep. You can also put them on the side of the pan, which will help them stand up. I know sometimes they can roll around and be a pain. But once they're done, remove them from the pan and then just repeat with the other batch. Once the meatballs are fully cooked through, we can then add in the sauce, making sure to scrape the bowl to get all of that delicious goodness in there. And we're going to mix this around regularly and bring it to a simmer. And then we're going to cook this for 2 minutes to slightly reduce. This sauce will also pick up any of that delicious flavour stuck on the pan. And if you do have a little bit of charring like I did, it will add fantastic smoky flavours. Once the sauce is reduced, lower the heat to medium-low, and then we're going to slide our balls back in there, add in all of those resting juices for extra flavour, and then we're going to turn the meatballs every 30 seconds or so just to get a nice glaze all over. The sauce will continue to reduce, so just keep an eye on that. If it does reduce too much, just turn it off the heat completely, but keep glazing those meatballs to get the best flavour. Don't forget to take your Instagram photos, because did you really meal prep if you didn't take a photo of it? And by the way, come follow me over there. But once all of that's done, these can then be removed from the stovetop, and this is the macros for the meatballs alone, obviously if you wanted to change this recipe up. As for serving up, it's super simple. I like to just divide everything by 5. Obviously, if you've been following my meal prep series for a while, you'd know I do that, but I will start adding all of the weights in the future just to make it a little bit clearer for you guys, especially if you like to count everything. For the meatballs, it is 3 per serving, and you will have some sauce left over in the pan, so make sure that you evenly distribute that between the 5 containers. You can garnish it with some spring onion or scallion along with some sesame seeds if you wanted to, but with all of that done, we are then left with these beautiful meatballs with that soft fluffy rice and the sesame broccolini, and these are the macros for the complete dish, and that is per portion. For storage, I recommend allowing these to cool down for about 10 minutes before placing on the lids. They'll last up to 5 days in the fridge and 5 months in the freezer.
There is also one last thing you can do before you serve it up, and that's hit it with a little bit of sriracha mayo. This is completely optional. We'll just add a nice little kick to it as well, even though there is already a little kick in there anyway. But other than that, all that's left to do is, of course, we can then dig in. That right there is easily the best recipe we've done on the meal prep series so far. The flavors are absolutely incredible and just blend together so well. There's a nice little texture from the broccolini, and the rice is super soft and fluffy, and this just is absolutely fantastic. There's no other words to really say. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button. It really does help me out, and consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
This thing is making me soft.